go over the example that we have today, a little more detail. I know it's a bit confusing and there's probably a lot going on. So we described already what happens to the window, the console, and the voice, and showed you how the general functionality operates. We talked about the parser, for instance, and the kinds of inputs, how it basically divides the inputs. So I'm going to show you a little more detail what actually is happening in that parser, as well as the call method that's happening in this try clause, to show you how the launch is actually occurring within the example we have today. So the code primarily resides, or does reside in frame, although we're using libraries, Java libraries, jars basically. So those are the things that we'll be using today. Let's go ahead and debug this. So I've set up a bunch of debug points in the program already. The first you see here, but I have others in hello indicated, and so those will be called as well, and I'll show you where they're called when the code is actually executing. Actually, before we do that, I pressed it by accident. I want to stop it, terminate it. Let's go back and show you something real quick. So just to reiterate the inputs, what's happening. So we have our main, the project, the main reference, the module. These are the libraries, the jars that are going to be called. The arguments are here, so these are the input arguments that are going into the program. They will be parsed over here. So let's launch the code and see what's actually going to happen. This is a good way to really learn something complicated and sophisticated, such as this code, where the code can be quite confusing actually. And so using debugger is a good way to understand it, and then also to do things like commenting the code if it's not commented properly. So the first thing you'll notice is this thing called register_UI is called, which is in this package. If we go to the hello, you can see it's called hello.py, so it's in the hello.py package. So let's get out of that real quick to see where we are. So we are in the hello.py package, and there it is. Notice that this is called before any of these things are called. The reason why is because, remember, we talked about this decorator referencing. Notice how the name register_UI is a decorator. So that decorator, so what we're telling it here is that we want to call this dynamically in the code as the code is executing. It is going to be called before the actual methods are going to be called in the main execution, in the main.py. So that means those things that are registered, the speech, .py, the window.py, these modules that are registered with this decorator referencing will be essentially activated and call that register_UI method. So this is telling us this method is going to be called, and it's referencing this other method. So not only will it call this method, but it will also then reference that method. So then it's used when it needs to be used or wants to be used, and we'll show you how it's used later on as the code progresses. So it's referencing at this point this method, and then also calling this method that has the actual reference indication. So the register_UI is called. These are referenced and to be used later. So it is all going to hello. So you can see now we are in decorator. And remember the window one, which is the one we're actually going to be using. So it's referencing this show message as window method. The register_UI is again saying that the window py is going to be a registered module, and the specific method that's going to be registered is this method right here. So let's go back to where we were. So to look at it a little more clearly, we are now in this register_UI. So the decorator method essentially is being called. And as it's indicated in the code, and so the first option is going to call this is this decorator sub method. So it actually is a method within a method, and all it really does is basically add to this UIS. So the UIS is a dictionary, as you can see defined here. It's going to be adding an input to that dictionary. So if we go back to globals, we'll see that, lo and behold, we have console now added to it. So console is in reference to that specific module, at least the referencing name to a module, but the actual method that's being referenced in that module. So it's not actually the whole module that's being referenced, but rather the specific method. But console it relates to that module that has console in it. Okay. So that's what's happening there. So we keep going, and then you'll see another one being referenced. So it runs again, and lo and behold, we're back in the decorator submethod. And at this point, we should get the second method being referenced, or the second module with a method being referenced. And it should be the window one. So the window in reference to the messaging input used. So if we go to window, so there's the window module. It's not actual, again, not the actual module, but but the method that we're referencing. So here we are, window being referenced, and show message is what we're going to actually be using. So the reason why we're referencing all these is basically allows us to then access these methods when we want them in a generic way. So I don't actually have to call the method, but rather I just simply need to refer to window, console, or speech, i.e. these messages that are indicated here, as a way to then activate the entire method. So it's a very powerful way to use a method without specifically calling it, basically. So that's a good way to think about it. So here we are. So that's probably enough of that. So it's basically registering those three things that we talked about in terms of the types of ways to show mark. So whether it's the console, window, or speech. So let's go somewhere else. Let's go to another part of code. Now we're going to see something called list_UIS. So this is now being called in the main method. So it's actually something explicitly called. You'll see it's called here. So here is basically within the parser, the add option. So we're taking the input UI, a user input, user interface reference, and it's going to look through this list that's coming back from hello.list_UIS. So essentially what's saying is, from each input in this hello list user interface, I want this user interface. I want to get the specific input that should be on there. So let's go look at what's actually in the list to know what the input it's referring to. So if you look at the UIS key, so let's look at the UIS, which is the dictionary. So the UIS is a dictionary, so it should have keys. Remember, keys have both, dictionaries have keys and values. Keys are the names. The values are the actual specific variable inputs. So dictionaries use keys, usually strings, that reference specific values. So a key could be a name of something, any kind of referencing key, basically. And so to get all those keys in a dictionary, you simply type .keys. So here we're going to return those keys. So it's going to be the window, the console, the speech. So keys are always on the left side in the two-sided part of a dictionary. So this is one input value of a dictionary, right? So it's going to be, I guess an easy way to show it is like this. So window, and then is to the left of the colon, and to the right of the colon is the actual method. So it'll return the key, which is the left side, the window in this case. So it's going to join that value, that UI value, okay, with the user interface window in there. So it's going to be the option in which UI that will be used. So the UI in this case is window because it's being added from this UIS, this list of keys. So that's a way basically to tell the code that the user input window will match the sort of dynamically referenced code window that was done when we did dynamic referencing using the decorator. So we've essentially linked the decorator input, the decorator value, the window, with our user value window. So now those two things are linked. So it's informing the code I want to activate that window, and we'll see how that's activated in a moment. Language, same thing here. It's going to be parsed and inputted. So we're going to have options and arguments. Again, I talked about before, so you can see the window here. The language default is English. We don't have to explicitly mention it. So let's go back to keep going to another part of the code we're interested in, which is the hello.greet. The hello.greet is going to call a method greet, so it's an explicit call to greet. Let's step into it to see what's actually happening. So if lang not in greet, so if language is not in greet, then it's going to raise this error. So it's a way to reference the error. So that's only if it's true it's going to raise that error, right? But it's not true because English is in there. It's en, it's the default input. Then it's going to go to this message method. So let's go into the message method. You'll see that it's in this if clause. So now it's going to go get that UI, the actual user interface that we want, which is window. So in UI in UIS, so we have UI and our UI is window, as you can see here. It is in UIS, so that's a true statement. Now, because the UI, the window, is referenced, dynamically referenced to the window module that we've created. So remember, this was referenced through this specific decorator. So now, by simply using window, we can access this entire method. So we can make an explicit call to that method without actually calling it. And this is how it's done. See, we're getting the UI from the UIS. This is the UIS dictionary. So we're getting the UI, the window, basically the window input. And we're saying with that window input, give it a message, MSG, okay, a message. Is another input value, and you can see again using debugger to know what this is. So if you're lost, you can just always go back to debugger and figure it out. It's hello Mark. Hello Mark is the input. Okay, so it's been created as hello Mark, and now it's going to then send that message to window. So what it should do is go to here. So if I put a debugger here, we should see it then being called. So let's let it run. And sure enough, we're landing, as you can see there. So you can see the stream of where things are called. If you go look at the different, if you put the debugger on, it stops in a breakpoint. You can see different parts of the code that were called to get to that point. So we went from hello.greet, that's being called. The greet then goes to message. That's called. Message then goes to here with the if clause, where it then calls that window reference. The window reference then goes to the frame creation, and basically the part where Java is being utilized via Jython. So it is technically Python, but it's really referencing Java code through the libraries that are integrated in the Python. And so all this is referencing Java essentially that will be created to create the specific framework. Or the specific GUI in this case. Okay, so that's how that's happening, and dynamic referencing works in Python, which then references, in this case, you don't have to use this, but in this case, it's then being used to create the Jython and thus Java GUI in this case. Okay, so that's how that works.